Hello students, were you able to understand all that I taught you in the first part of the lesson? What are the points that we have covered so far? Can you just give me a quick rehash? Some of the major things we already covered were, number one, we looked at the background. You remember that? After background, we went to the Puritan element of the novel, after which we went into some details of the plot of the drama. I believe that you have been able to understand all that I have been explaining to you. Now, in the second part of this novel, I shall highlight some other important aspects of the novel. Obviously, when Hawthorne wrote this novel, he didn't have in mind merely a plot. There were many other considerations which he wanted to express through this important novel called The Scarlet Letter. Let me talk for a moment about the genesis of the novel. What do we mean by the word genesis? The word genesis means the beginning. Here, genesis also means the germ, the idea or the concept. We read how Nathaniel Hawthorne made an entry in his diary regarding an old colony law where a young woman is made to suffer and is punished for the sin of adultery. This was the entry that Hawthorne made in his diary. This was done 6 years before the novel was actually published. The Scarlet Letter has an autobiographical element. Hawthorne's mother, named Elizabeth Hawthorne, she had the same experience of having a child outside the institution of marriage. So, as a young boy, Nathaniel witnessed his mother's struggle in bringing up his siblings and himself. So, this is how he gets the idea of publishing this novel, The Scarlet Letter. However, the novel sees the light of day only after 6 years, and this coincides with the death of his mother. So, actually the novel was written as a kind of elegy in her memory. Do you know what is the meaning of elegy? Written posthumously and also with a very sad tone. And what was he going to talk about? He was going to highlight the plight of women. In the earlier part, we had just talked about Puritan law, how strict they were to Hester, to Dimmesdale. But now we are going to see how Hector becomes a victim of the patriarchal structure. What do you mean by a patriarchal structure? Who is a patriarch? A patriarch is a father figure. Who is a matriarch? The mother. So, in the world, sometimes we have society where patriarchy is dominant. Now, this is what Hawthorne is attempting to do. He is trying to highlight how the laws of patriarchy oppress women in these sections, in that small place in America, which was called Salem. Okay, we are now looking at the small place in Boston, America called Salem. So, this entry was made many years ago, but after his mother's death, he publishes it. And interestingly, the girl Pearl we have studied about, she is modeled on the character of Hawthorne's own daughter, and her name was Una, U-N-A. Una, in our language we have Uma, U-M-A, but this is Una. So, he got the idea of that girl, precocious, bright, from his own daughter who was called Una. So, now we have quickly looked at the genesis of the novel. How does Hawthorne get this idea? I have explained that to you. Now, in a short while, we shall go into an important aspect called characterization. In the earlier segment of the novel, I had introduced to you various characters, the major characters. Can you quickly tell me the first name in that list of major characters? Hester Prynne. Now, I shall tell you a little more about Hester Prynne. The impression you have gained about Hester so far is that she is a young woman who has been punished by the elders in the community for her sin of adultery. Now you find that Hester is by nature shy. She is sensitive and she faces her situation in a very stoic manner. She does not show in her attitude or in her behavior any reaction to the adverse circumstances around her. Now, when Hester lives in the settlement, she is able to evolve her character. This is a very interesting dimension of Hester. So, Hester becomes undoubtedly the protagonist of the novel because she is able to develop her character, she is able to gain strength, and it is very, very interesting that although she leaves the settlement after Dimmesdale dies and after Roger Chillingworth dies, she chooses to come back. She knows that if she is able to resist the adverse circumstances, she would be able to translate the meaning of A from adultery into the next shift is able, culminates into angel. Arthur Dimmesdale, please bear in mind that he is a minister, a religious minister, an Oxford University scholar, and also a pastor. So you find that this man is very talented, intellectually, spiritually. For example, he has got the power of oratory. He is able to give very powerful sermons. When people listen to his sermons, they think it is just the best quality that they have ever heard. Sin, this is one of the important themes. I'll be dealing with it shortly. He suffers from that guilt. He suffers pangs of conscience. I told you earlier, he indulges in self-flagellation. Now, why does he do all this? He is trying to make what is called atonement for sin because he suffers great anguish. Because, you can call that the redeeming virtue. When he is no longer able to tolerate, he knows that his public image is very different from his private views about his character. That is what causes him to suffer. His public image is very high, people think very highly of him. But in his heart, he knows that he does not deserve that kind of respect. So finally, he establishes that period in his life when he professes publicly his sin. And that action costs him his life. Do you understand how this is drawn? This is different from Hester. If you compare Hester and Dimmesdale, she is much stronger. Now, Roger Chillingworth, I must tell you about his physical appearance. He is a hunchback. He has got a stooping posture. He is evil. He is evil. He is revengeful. He has only one simple mission in life, and that is to take revenge. The only mistake that Hester has committed is that she has separated herself from Roger Chillingworth. Now, he comes into the novel with only that negative notion that somehow he should be able to take revenge, not only on Hester, but also on the partner in that crime. He is the villain. He is represented as the devil in the novel. Yet, the novelist Hawthorne wants to give even Chillingworth a redeeming feature. So, you can conveniently call Roger Chillingworth the villain of the novel. Pearl, as we already know, is the illegitimate child of Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale. Pearl's experiences of life are very unique. She does not know who her father is. She knows her mother is being punished, but she does not realize for what the punishment is. So, you find that this girl acquires a sense of maturity very fast because she is a witness to her mother's daily suffering. Every time her mother suffers, and this girl watches her mother suffering in silence. After that episode, she recognizes that her mother and the pastor are involved with each other. So now she wants her father to acknowledge that not in private, but in public. Which of the characters do you appreciate the most in the context of the Puritan environment? Arthur Dimmesdale? Why would you choose Arthur Dimmesdale?
You see, you're telling about that redeeming character, Rama.
Yes.
So I believe he might have done some things wrong, but then in the end, what he does stands out as his character.
Does anyone have a different point of view?
I think I'd appreciate Hester Prynne because she didn't blame Arthur Dimmesdale in front of the whole crowd. She waited for him
Yes.
to admit in front of the public.
So you would say that Hester Prynne is a stronger character.
Yes.
She's got more admirable qualities.
Yes.
Let us examine an important theme used by the novelist. One of the major themes that you find in the novel The Scarlet Letter is the connection between knowledge and sin. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, knowledge is always associated with sin and suffering. Now, in the Genesis, you find Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. You find that in that Garden of Eden, there is what is called the tree of knowledge. Are you familiar with this story? Yes. Now, when Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, become aware of the difference between good and evil. So, you have in the novel a clear line of demarcation, and the clear line of demarcation is the fall. Before the fall is the primal state of human innocence in the Garden of Eden before man committed sin. After the fall is the suffering caused by sin, and this sin happens because of knowledge. The Scarlet Letter is modeled on this concept of the connection between knowledge and sin, sin followed by suffering. Now, let us apply Arthur Dimmesdale and Hester to the Garden of Eden. What will you find? You will find that before Arthur Dimmesdale and Hester Prynne committed adultery, they belong to that period before the fall. Just imagine in your minds the Garden of Eden, and you have the two characters, Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale, before the fall and after the fall. Now, Arthur Dimmesdale represents Adam in the Garden of Eden, while Hester Prynne represents Eve in the Garden of Eden. What happens to these individuals after they acquire knowledge? Knowledge here is equal to physical pleasure. When you use the word knowledge, we don't understand it like how we use it today. Here it means physical pleasure. So, when Adam, Arthur Dimmesdale, or Eve, Hester Prynne, when they ate the forbidden fruit, that is when they indulged in physical pleasure, that resulted in sin. This is what Puritans refer to as the original sin. Now, I would like you to look at Hester's life after the sin. What is the quality of her life? Can't we not call it miserable? It is miserable, it is deplorable, because after that she has to undergo a 7-year period of scorn, shame, humiliation and degradation. Now, look at Arthur Dimmesdale. This is what Hawthorne is trying to reflect. What happens to Dimmesdale? He suffers anguish in private, and I think you can call his agony more intense than Hester's, because it is so private and he is not able to disclose it to anyone. So, you will find that in the mind of the Puritan, please listen to this point very carefully, in the Puritan mindset, knowledge is always connected to sin. Sin in turn results in suffering. So, this is what Hawthorne is actually trying to reflect in the novel. And Pearl, being the product of this sin, she also suffers. I mean, Pearl is an innocent victim. The other two are willing, consenting adults, but here we have a child who becomes a victim, vulnerable, but yet she suffers. So, when you look at this tradition, this worldview, you always find that knowledge results in suffering. Now, you find that in Hawthorne's depiction, even Roger Chillingworth does not enjoy the fruit of his knowledge. Rather, he suffers. He wants to take revenge. He punishes not only others, I think he is most cruel to himself. by being negative. So, here is Hawthorne talking about this very dominant view. For the Puritan mind, any kind of indulgence, any kind of pleasure is a sin. They cannot get this out of their minds. And in their way of thinking, sin brings on punishment. They do not believe, very much in the concept that if you have sinned, you can repent and you can get forgiveness. An interesting aspect of the Scarlet Letter is the representation of the black man. There are constant references. Everybody refers to the black man. But the humorous thing is that the black man is a concept that can apply to each of the characters. For example, sometimes Arthur Dimmesdale is referred to as a black man. Why would the black man title be applicable to Arthur Dimmesdale? Because in the way he hides his crime, he is evil. So, there are many references made to the black man in the character of Arthur Dimmesdale. Very often, the black man is a direct reference to Roger Chillingworth. Very often in the novel you will find that whenever the phrase black man is used, it is a direct reference to Roger Chillingworth, because he is the villain of the novel, he is evil, and we have seen all the other qualities that he exhibits in the novel. Sometimes this concept of the black man is also connected or used in the context of a minor character. Can you tell me the minor characters we had studied in the earlier segment? We had looked at John Wilson. Another character we had looked at was the governor's sister. Her name is Mistress. And the governor himself, Governor Bellingham. Now write down the name of Mistress Hibbins. Mistress Hibbins is suspected in the novel to be a witch. They think that she is a witch. So, sometimes when they say black man, it can also refer to Mistress Hibbins. So, this title is very interesting because it is not a physical character, it is not a representation, but it keeps varying in the way it is used, in the way sometimes it is referred to in some characters. Now, you will find that in the list of characters, the Scarlet Letter A is also a character. We had looked at the Scarlet Letter A. Now, that is also a character. How does it become a character? Because it signifies evil. It is an evil act. A stands for adultery. So, you will find the black man, the image of the black man, the meaning, the application being used not only for one single character in the novel, in fact, it is used for various characters. Some of them are Roger Chillingworth, Arthur Dimmesdale, Mistress Hibbins, and interestingly, it is also applied to Pearl. Now, you might ask, why should it be applied to Pearl? In the novel, Pearl is seen as the devil's child. They say, whose child is she? Well, we don't know her paternity, so she could be the devil's child. So, you have the black man, symbol, the concept also being applied to Pearl. I mean, this is very abstract, there are no direct references, but you find this image of the black man pervading powerfully in many chapters of the novel. Now, we shall look at the theme of identity in the novel. Identity is a reference to a particular person, the person's individuality or the personality. That is what we mean by identity. You find that in the novel, the identity of Arthur Dimmesdale is Dim. Dimmesdale. How did you write it down? Please spell the word. D-I-M-M-E-S-D-A-L-E. Dims. What does dim mean? Dull. Here it not only means dull, it also means cowardly. Now, let us look at the name of Hester Prynne. The surname Prynne rhymes with sin. Prynne, sin. I know it's a little amusing, but that's how it is. See? Prin to rhyme with sin. Now, throughout the novel you will find that although the character of Hester evolves, she is not able to get out of that A symbol. You will be shocked to know that even after Hester dies, she is buried in a tomb beside Arthur Dimmesdale, but there is a gap between the tombs, and in that gap you have the letter A. Whereas there is evolution in the character of Hester and Arthur Dimmesdale. They become better. Does the community accept that? No. That is why her surname is Prynne, to rhyme with sin. Now let us look at the next character, Roger Chillingworth. Chilling. What is chilling? Sometimes you watch horror movies. Yeah, your chill runs down your spine. What's the chill? Scary, frightful. That's why he gave the name Chillingworth. He's so scary. Imagine him in the laboratory with that fire emanating. It's scary, and he's a hunchback, stooping posture. It must have been pretty scary. That is why the name Chillingworth is given to Roger. Now let us look at Pearl. Does she have a suggestive name? Yes. Pearl, what does Pearl stand for? Pearl is something that is precious. It's a precious gem. So we find that the only character that is spared in the novel is Pearl. There is no negative name given to her, because she still remains like a pearl, being positive even in adverse circumstances. The Scarlet Letter finally concludes on a note of symbolism. Yes, a symbol is an image or a metaphor used to express something else. Therefore, you find that the Scarlet Letter makes use of symbols. For example, let us look at that chapter which is called the prison door. In the prison door, Hester is released after serving her sentence. So when she comes out, you will find very close to her a rose bush growing. That freedom or that liberty which you find in the rose growing in the rose bush. So when she comes out, it is a contrast. The prison is very dark and dull and gloomy, and just when she comes out, there is this rose bush and there's a beautiful rose, as a reminder to the reader that Hester is being deprived of her freedom. Now let me talk to you about the symbolism of the name Pearl. Pearl in the Bible stands for salvation. If a person is redeemed, a person is able to move from his journey in earth and go to heaven. The Puritans gave a lot of importance to the concept of salvation, or what they call the concept of redemption. In fact, they looked at the earthly life as a barrier in their journey to heaven. That is how they looked at life. So when you find the character of Pearl, you must understand the symbolic meaning. She is not just a little girl, she is not just a precocious girl, she is a girl who will finally liberate others. She will become a source of salvation. How would she do that? She would do that because she is a mere child. She would do that because her reaction to the environment is very spontaneous. It is not like her mother's reaction. It is not like the reaction of Roger Chillingworth. So Pearl in the novel occupies a position of key importance by virtue of her name, by virtue of the symbolism of her name, which means salvation. Sometimes people also say Pearl stands for wisdom. So we can connect the two. We can say salvation achieved through wisdom. So these are some of the symbols that Hawthorne employs in the novel. So in a nutshell, we have studied the novel, The Scarlet Letter, from its various angles.